Hey all, this is Jessica with K&A Greenhouse. Today's presentation is going to be on the Wisconsin native woody plants. So it won't be any of the herbaceous perennials. I am more of a tree and shrub person, so that's what I have put together for you today. Just a note, definitely not going to be all of the native plants that we have here in Wisconsin. This is only the ones that we will have available for sale for the 2022 season. I have all of these plants coming in the spring. Cannot guarantee that they'll be around in summer or even when we close up for the season. Just really depends on supply and demand at this point. So another note, I'm not going to have this little box here of me. So if I did, I would end up covering up a lot of the photos that I have in the next slides because I wanted to get as many photos of the plants in as possible. So I'm gonna take me out and you guys can see the plants instead of looking at me. First question is, what is a native plant? So basically it's a plant that's adapted to this area, in this case to Wisconsin. Um, it's typically one that you'll see before humans came. Definitely something that grows in the woodlands or prairies here in Wisconsin. The ones that we're selling have not been altered by humans. So basically, it is the same plant that you'll find growing in the wild. So, for example, if I'm talking about a witch hazel that we're going to be selling this year, it's going to be the same plant with the same genetics as what you would find if you were going for a walk in one of the state parks and you found a witch hazel there. So the first native shrub that we'll be selling this year is New Jersey tea. Definitely native here in Wisconsin. Hardy to zone 4, so not quite as hardy as some of the other species we'll see. This is the smallest of the natives that you'll see in this presentation. Generally speaking, native plants tend to be quite large, so they haven't been bred to be smaller. There are a few of the native varieties that will be smaller like this one, but this didn't need any modifications to it. It's typically 2 to 3 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet wide, full sun to part sun, so it'll need a minimum of 4 hours of sun a day. You can see the white flowers, kind of a close-up photo here. The bottle brush flowers on it bloom in June, right around the same time as roses start to flower. Um, Typically like a 3 to 4 week period of blooming, and then it's done. So the flowers do attract pollinators. Butterflies really like the bottle brush. They actually attract a lot of small insects and bees. And actually, they'll also attract hummingbirds because the hummingbirds will actually eat the small insects that are attracted to the flowers. So the hummingbirds don't necessarily eat the flowers themselves, but they'll eat the insects. So it'll attract hummingbirds regardless. This one is tolerant of dry to moist sites, but they do not like to be in standing water. So if you have a low spot or if you have an area by a downspout, do not plant this by there. It'll basically suffocate it and drown it. This also is great for rocky slopes. So if you have a dry, like a south-facing slope or hill, and you just want to keep the soil on that hill, this is definitely a good option for you. And this one also is deer and rabbit resistant. So if you have problems with either one of those, I'd probably still, if you do sprays or fencing or anything, when it's young, I would probably do that just until it gets big enough. But generally speaking, the critters don't really like to feed on this one. In the fall, the foliage is going to be a nice yellow color, so you'll get that added bonus to the landscape. Great dogwood. Definitely one of the more wild looking. You can see from the photo on the left, it doesn't really have much of a shape to it. It takes some pruning, but I don't know that I would shape it so much. As a native species, they generally tend to be a little more unkept and you know, uh, like I said, they look wild. They have a lot of stems coming up from the ground. They don't have one main trunk at all. Um, if you want something to be a smaller dogwood, there's quite a few different varieties on the market right now that will be, 3 to 4 or 5 feet. This one is going to mature around 10 to 15 feet tall with about the same width. One note for you, it is definitely not rabbit or deer resistant. I have had deer grazing on mine pretty much every winter, regardless of if I spray it or fence it or not. So this one tastes good to them. It hasn't died yet. I mean, it's been fed on probably about 3 or 4 winters now, but it's never really gotten much bigger. So it's kind of actually topped out around 3 feet, and then the deer eat it down to 3 feet again, and then it grows over the season, and they eat it down for me. So this one is a nice native plant because it's very tolerant of a lot of different sites. So it'll tolerate dry, moist to standing water. Pretty much anywhere you want to put it is fine in terms of site. It tolerates all soil types as well, in full sun to full shade. So just a note, if you do plant it in full shade, it'll probably not be as compact. It'll be a little bit more leggy, won't have as many leaves at the bottom of it, so you'll have more top growth on the plant. And it'll grow a little bit slower too, which is probably why mine that keeps getting eaten by the deer doesn't really fill in, because it is in a full shade situation. This one is hardy to zone 3, so definitely hardy here in Wisconsin. And if you want to attract the birds, the berries of the gray dogwood attract the birds. They'll eat the pagoda dogwood berries first, given the choice, but the pretty much any dogwood will get either navy blue or white berries on it, and the birds will clean it off pretty quickly. They don't generally leave them to persist on the plant through the winter. And with most dogwoods, this one also gets a maroon purple fall color. The American hazelnut is kind of gaining ground in terms of popularity. This is also known as American filbert. So if you're looking for hazelnut or filbert, this is the same one and the same plant. The shrub form is actually quite tall at maturity, 15 to 18 feet tall, 10 to 12 feet wide. So you do need to give it a little bit of space. And one note for you, in order to get the hazelnuts, you need 2 or 3 plants in the same vicinity to cross-pollinate. So if you have plant A, it cannot pollinate itself. It needs to be pollinated from plant B or plant C instead. It's the same thing. You have to have 3 American hazelnuts, so you don't need a different variety. But it just needs, for some reason, it needs a separate plant to get pollinated and form the hazelnuts. But if you don't want the hazelnuts and you just like the shrub, you can go with just the one, and then you won't get the hazelnuts. Full sun to part shade for this one, so it needs minimum of 4 hours of sun a day. The fall color will range from orange to yellow depending on how much sun it gets. So if you give it a full sun situation with 6 hours or more, it'll be more of an orange color. If it's more of a part sun in your landscape, it'll be more of a yellow or a very pale orange. This one, the soil, it'll tolerate all soil types. And basically any type of site, except it does not like standing water. So don't put it in an area that's a low spot, or like I said, by a downspout. That wouldn't work very well either. And a hardiness zone on this one is a zone 3. So common witch hazel is one that you see quite a bit on the edges of woodlands here in Wisconsin. So the photo on the left-hand side is actually not usually the type of place you would see it. It doesn't generally like to have full sun, prefers part sun to full shade, so basically 4 hours or less of sun each day. The flowers you can see on the right hand side, those bloom in the fall, so typically it's an October flowering season versus spring or summer like a lot of other shrubs. I'll show you in the next slide in a little bit. The fall color on it is yellow, so the flowers tend to basically blend into the yellow fall color, so you do need to get pretty close in order to see the flowers and in the fall foliage there. This one will also max out it's basically like a small tree again, 10 to 15 feet tall, 10 to 15 feet wide. So again, you need to give it a lot of space in your landscape. It can handle a little bit of pruning, but again, if you want something smaller, don't try to prune this to be a 5-foot plant. It's just better to go with something else that flowers yellow or is a little bit smaller, that's bred to be that way. And this one is salt tolerant, which I can actually attest to. I have it pretty close to my driveway, and I do put a fair amount of salt down because our driveway is an uphill. So in the winter, every time it gets icy, we need to have salt on our driveway in order to get our cars out of the driveway. So this doesn't seem to phase the witch hazel at all. The only thing that has really hampered its growth is the rabbits and deer feeding on it. So again, if you do have rabbits or deer, you'll need to be careful with it. Fence it in when it's younger. Once it gets larger, it can handle the deer browsing. But when it's a young plant, I used to have two actually on my property, and the rabbits ate it down to basically a 2-inch nub by the end of the winter. So if I had fenced it in and kept the rabbits from eating it, it can, once they get bigger, like I said, it'll handle the deer browsing, but you'll need to help it out just a little bit when they're younger. Um, Tolerant of all soil types, it prefers kind of a dry or well-drained, kind of a loamy type of site. It does not like to have wet feet if possible. And this one, like I said, seen a lot in northern Wisconsin, so it's hardy to zone 3. Will definitely grow here in the Madison area. And this slide just basically shows the fall color of the witch hazel. So like I said, it's a nice golden yellow, so you do get a nice fall color. However, it basically makes it impossible to tell the difference from far away of where the flowers are versus the foliage. So something that you need to keep in mind if you're getting it for the flowers. You may need to put it somewhere that you can see, like on the edge, on the corner of your house or something, if you can see it from a window. Or if you're like me and you like to walk around your garden beds, then I do see it when it's flowering, just because I walk around my gardens, not on a daily basis, but pretty close. So I do notice it. But it's not something, if you plant it out on the woodlands or the edge of your property, you're probably not going to be able to see the difference between the yellow flowers and the yellow fall color. So this shrub is one that I've been trying to get in for a while. It's called Bladdernut. It is native to Wisconsin. It's actually seen a lot more in Illinois than it is in Wisconsin, but it's hardy to zone 4, so you'll see it in southern parts of this state as well. This prefers part sun, so if you can give it 4 to 6 hours of sun each day. If you give it too much, it might not do really well. You might notice browning on the edges, and if you give it too much shade, it just won't grow as well. This one will max out around 8 to 12 feet tall and approximately the same width. So again, you need to give it a little bit of room in your landscape. This one is another one that would do well on the as an accent plant on the corner of your house, or if you have a woodland edge, you can definitely put it there. As you can see, the flowers, the buds themselves are kind of a pale pink. They form in clusters. They're bell-shaped when they bloom. They're white in color. Of course, they attract hummingbirds because of the tubular shape, and the pollinators as well will be attracted to this plant. They typically bloom in spring, and then from the right hand photo, you can see the fruit. It's a papery type of fruit. They appear in late summer and then they'll persist through the winter. So it's a good source of food for any of the critters or birds that are basically wintering over here in Wisconsin. This particular plant will tolerate all soil types and all sites. So if you have a dry spot, this will do well. If you have a really wet spot, this will also do well there. Generally speaking, pretty much anywhere, if you have a part sun location, any kind of site you have, it will do just fine. So that does it for the native shrubs we'll be carrying this year. Moving on to the native trees. The sugar maple is Wisconsin's state tree, so clearly it is native to Wisconsin. It prefers a full sun to part shade location. Generally, when you find it in the woods, it's an understory plant when it's seedling. Then it becomes a full sun plant when it gets older. A lot of the maple forests that you see up north, um, the maples and the beech are the last trees that you'll find in the succession of a forest. So that's typically why you'll see the maples as an understory plant first. In the landscape, though, full sun to part shade is fine as long as it gets 4 hours or more of sun each day. It'll be perfectly happy. The mature size on the sugar maple trees is 60 to 75 feet tall and 40 to 50 feet wide. So this tree in the photo here is the fall color. Don't expect it to be this pretty orange red throughout the season. It has green leaves in spring and summer, and then it changes to this bright orange and red color in the fall. The sugar maples do get seeds, which a lot of people call helicopters. They're kind of that papery samara, which don't necessarily seed all that prolifically or well like the Norway maples typically do. You'll see those. They're kind of invasive almost in the landscapes, but sugar maples don't take quite as well. So you don't really need to worry about too many of the seedlings popping up. And honestly, I have a couple Norway maples and one sugar maple tree on my property, and I'm constantly pulling the Norway maples, but the sugar doesn't seem really. I mean, if there's 3 or 4 that I'm pulling, that's probably a good year. Um, the soil types, it prefers more of a sandy or loamy soil. Dry to moist, does not like to have a wet site. And typically it'll grow in clay soils, but it doesn't prefer them. Also does not do well with compaction. So don't put it in an area that's close to a sidewalk or a driveway because that'll compact the roots a little bit too much. And then this particular maple tree is hardy to zone 4. So southern half of the state, right along the lakefront, will do fine. Way farther north, not so much. But like I said, I mean, I've seen the maple forest up in Rhineland or Tomahawk area, so still pretty decent hardiness zone for the sugar maple trees. The next native tree in Wisconsin that we'll be selling this year is the blue beech, otherwise known as musclewood. You can see in the photo on the right, that is the trunk or branch of a somewhat mature tree. Has the kind of stripes in the bark just to give it a little bit unique quality. This tree is a little bit shorter than a lot of the other trees I'll be going over. It's 20 to 30 feet tall and same width approximately when it's mature. One note is this is a very slow growing tree. There have been a couple of people who have commented in the past about how slow it is. I also purchased one in 2018, so this will be its 4th season going into my landscape. The last 3 seasons, it's pretty much put on about 4 inches of growth every year. So it's not by any stretch a fast growing tree. Just make sure that you're aware of that if you do decide to plant it in your landscape. Full sun to part shade again, just like the sugar maple. The fall color ranges based on how much sun it gets. So it'll get a red-orange fall color if you give it full sun. If it's more of a part shade where it's planted, it'll be more of a pale yellow color. So definitely brighter based on how much sunlight it will get. The canopy on this is kind of an oval or round canopy when it's mature. When it's younger, it's more of a pyramid shape, which is what I have right now. The flowers on it are very insignificant. You don't really notice them all that much, but the seeds are, once again, a papery type of seed. Kind of looks like hops, if you've ever seen a hops vine. So those will hang on. When the tree is older, it'll start to develop that. Mine doesn't have any of the seeds yet on it, so it's based on what my suppliers told me. The one that I have planted is probably 10 to 12-year-old tree, and I still don't see any seeds on it. So it really does need to be more of a mature size before you'll start to see those seeds coming. But those will hang on in the fall and even into early winter. So that is a seed. It's a food source for some of the wildlife, possibly birds, as they overwinter here in Wisconsin. And this particular plant is hardy to zone 3, so basically pretty much everywhere here in the state of Wisconsin. All right, the next one is a river birch, and the photo here shows the main reason why so many people like this tree, the coppery bark. It peels with age. It won't peel at all when it's younger, but as it ages, you'll start to see the bark peeling away. It will always have this copper color. It'll be darker when it's younger, but it'll be a little bit lighter copper color when it's mature size. The river birch is technically in the wild is a single stem tree. Um, for whatever reason, back probably 40, 50 years ago, people decided they really liked the look of a clump birch. So our wholesale suppliers started planting 2, 3, and sometimes 4 of the single trees into pots together to give it that clump look. So that's actually what we sell are the clump birches. I can get them in a single stem, but we don't usually order them in unless it's a special order just because when we've had them in the past as single stem, we basically sit on them all season long. So that's not something I typically get in as a single stem. The river birch prefers full sun, and it is going to be a fairly large tree. The native species is 40 to 60 feet tall and approximately the same width, depending on how many of those trunks you have coming in. I believe most of the ones I have that will be here this spring will be 3 clump. I don't think I have any of the 2 clump or the 4 clump. So generally speaking, it'll be 40 to 60 feet wide at maturity. As they age, a lot of people don't like to have the lower branches like it's pictured here, so they'll prune it up. So just keep in mind 40 feet doesn't mean you need to have a bed that's 40 feet wide, because a lot of times you'll just prune it up as it gets older and taller so you can have other things underneath it. Birches in general get really stressed out if it's too dry. River birch has a little bit better tolerance for droughty conditions, but still they have such a shallow root system. It's best if you can mulch over the top of that root system. Don't put the mulch right up against the trunk because that will actually rot the bark on the trunk, but mulching over the root system, don't just plant it in the middle of your lawn and then let it compete with the grass roots for water and nutrients. But like I said, this one's a little bit more drought tolerant because it's a river birch. Of course, it will tolerate wetter sites, standing water sometimes in the spring. It is native to riverbeds right along the banks of the rivers, Mississippi River and Wisconsin River here in Wisconsin. This birch is also the most resistant to the birch borer, so that is a great selling point as well. And one note for the foliage on the river birch. Doesn't really affect other birch types as much, but with river birch, they, for some reason, if you have them planted in a really heavy soil, like a clay soil, it typically cannot take up the nutrients it wants or that it needs to survive. So you'll notice the leaves may turn kind of a pale green or even a yellow. So if you really want a river birch and you know you have a heavier soil, clay soil, just find one of us at the garden center and we'll be able to kind of walk you through to help you keep your river birch healthy. Hackberry is one of the native trees that has been very underused. The berries, as you can see in the left-hand photo, it does get navy blue colored berries, which the birds actually really enjoy. So if you're trying to get some food sources for birds for over the winter, this is definitely an option for you. In Mount Horeb, where I live, they've started planting these along the streets because they're very tolerant of salt. They tolerate compaction, small spaces, full sun, part sun. They're very adaptable to pretty much any site and soil you can put it in, including wet sites. So if you do have a wet spot that you're looking for a tree, this would be definitely a good option for you. It's also a very fast-growing tree. So if you don't want one of the hybrid maples, but you're still looking for a faster-growing shade tree, this would be a great option for you. And the corky bark on it is very unique. You don't see that a whole lot in a lot of of the larger trees, so that's a great selling point as well. The foliage is typically a lighter, kind of almost mint green in the summer, and then as fall hits, it'll be like a butter yellow color. So you'll get the yellow for the fall color, and then the berries do hang on as long as the birds don't eat them. But I went for a walk in January here in town, and I've noticed that all of the hackberry berries were actually off the trees already because the birds had feasted on them through the winter. So um, as I said, definitely going to attract the birds with this one, and even some butterfly species that we have here in Wisconsin. It's a food source for certain butterflies. The hardiness zone on this one is a zone 3, so once again, it's very adaptable, grows fast, very underutilized. So if you do decide to plant this tree, chances are your neighbors probably won't have it. Pagoda dogwood is and remains a very popular ornamental size tree. It's one that can grow in shade, will also tolerate part sun, but if you give it more than 4 hours of sun a day, it tends to burn out, does not do well, gets really stressed out. So this is a great native tree. I always have a hard time finding it. I do have some clump forms coming in this spring, and then later in the summer, I have some single stem tree forms coming in. So if you're looking for them, it's actually best to let us know so we can get you on the customer list right away because we don't have that many coming in at either of our locations this year. As I said, part sun to full shade. This one, the size really varies based on if it's a single stem tree form or if it's a clump form with multiple trunks coming out of the ground. The minimum height that it will be is 15 feet. It can get up to 25 feet tall, and about the same width. It'll be 15 to 25 feet wide. The photo on the left shows the horizontal branching pattern that it has. It's not going to be like an oval shape. It's actually more of a vase shape, but it has the really cool horizontal layering. It's very unique to that tree. You can see the white flowers that bloom in spring. You'll get those typically right around the middle of May, kind of the same time as when the crab apples will be blooming. And then in late summer, the navy blue berries, they'll come in August or September at the very latest. The robins at my house love these. Cedar waxwings also feast on these. Like I said in the gray dogwood portion, the birds probably the favorite dogwood berries are the pagoda dogwoods, but they'll eat just about any dogwood berries. These definitely will not last to the winter, just because they eat them basically as soon as they get ripe in the summer. So this one also, another great point about it is it has maroon purple fall color, just like most of the other dogwoods. So that gives you just a little bit extended season in your landscape if you do decide to go with this one. Also hardy to zone 3. So once again, it's very hardy for just about everywhere here in Wisconsin. Quaking aspen is a bit of a controversial tree. You either love it or you hate it, I've come to find. So quaking aspen are great because they're a very fast growing tree. They also, because of that reason, they don't live very long. The bark on this is a kind of a gray white. It's very similar to a paper birch, without the problems of getting the birch borer. So quaking aspen are not susceptible to the borer, whereas birch, you kind of take your chances on that. Generally speaking, they are sold as a single stem tree form, like you see in the left-hand photo. However, when you buy a quaking aspen, generally speaking, you will end up with more than one. They're very famous for colonizing areas. They kind of take over. So if you don't have the room for little seedlings to be popping up, I would definitely go for something else. In the fall, they turn a very brilliant kind of bronzy yellow color, kind of a golden yellow color. Very famous for that happening in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. So that is a great punch of color in the fall. Aspen tend to be 40 to 50 feet tall, 20 to 30 feet wide. They're kind of a tall, skinny tree. You can see the growing habit there in the left-hand photo. And no real significant flowers or fruit. They are related to the cottonwoods, so they have kind of like basically I call it snow in summer, where it looks like it's snowing in June because of the puffy seeds. But I mean, there's nothing pretty about the flowers on this particular tree. It's the hardiest of all of the natives that we have. It's hardy to zone 1, so basically polar vortex probably will never kill this tree. If it dies, it's probably actually going to be there's a type of canker that affects it. Um, they don't also prefer to be they do prefer to be in a drier soil. They don't like to have standing water, but they also don't like to be very dry. So if you have a rocky site, you're gonna have to make sure that you water it, especially when it's getting established. Um, they're semi drought tolerant, I guess is a good way to describe it. So the first 3 years, you always have to make sure you take care of trees and shrubs just to make sure they get rooted in well. This one you may have to watch it if we do get another droughty summer. Just make sure that they stay watered in well. A lot of people like this too because the leaves on it, it has a flat stem on the leaf. So when the breeze catches it, it just makes the sound of the leaves kind of fluttering in the breeze. You'll see a little bit of a silvery underside on the green portion of the leaf as well. Okay, so we are getting into the oak section. There are 4 different oak trees that are native to Wisconsin that we will be selling, and additionally, I also have some of the different varieties of these native species on order. So if you're not looking for something to be quite as huge as the natives are, because they do get quite large, you probably are going to want to go with like a regal prince that's tall and skinny instead of being huge like you can see from the photo of the Burr Oak. Um, the Burr Oak will get to be 70 to 80 feet tall and about the same width. Lots of branching coming off of that main trunk. A lot of times the branch off very low as well. So if you see an oak tree that has branches pretty close to the ground, more often than not, it's probably a Burr Oak tree. You can see the leaves, they're lobed, they're more rounded, and it's not even that lobed towards the top of the leaf. The acorns themselves have the cap on the acorn, and it covers at least 50% of the acorn, if not almost the entire thing. And then the bark on Burr Oaks are very corky and bumpy, so that's another identification that you can use. The acorns are a favorite of wood ducks, so if you have wood ducks in the area or you want to see if you can try and catch them on their migration, you can definitely plant the Burr Oak trees and see if that helps. Turkeys, deer, rabbits, and squirrels also feed on the acorns. And of course, the squirrels, they'll be digging holes in your garden in the fall to try and store these for over the winter. I have a mature Burr Oak, and then I have one that I planted about 4 years ago on the property. And the squirrels do, between the black walnuts I have and the acorns, they have holes dug in the lawn all the time, and it's okay with me because I don't really like grass anyway. So it's fine if they need to store their acorns and walnuts in our lawn. The Burr Oak, as a just a side note, Burr Oak do live up to the rumor that oak trees grow slowly. This is probably 4 to 6 inches a year is what you're going to see from it. So if you do plant this one, it's going to take a very long time to be, 70 to 80 feet tall. Probably not in your lifetime that you would be able to see if it's only putting on 6 inches of growth every year. Again, with this one, it also does not have really great fall color. It tends to go straight from green to brown. So don't plant this one if you want something with outstanding fall color. So red oak is kind of almost the opposite of the Burr Oak. It has, you can see in the photo here, red fall color, and it's very bright red. Sometimes it's almost a maroon color, depending on site and how much sun it gets. Red oaks do prefer full sun. They will tolerate partial shade, but then you won't get as fast of growth. You won't get the bright red fall color. It'll be kind of a muted red instead. And contrary to the belief that all oak trees are very slow growing, the red oak is actually a very fast growing tree. This one almost rivals the hybrid maples, like the Matador Autumn Blaze that so many people want just because it's such a fast growing tree. The red oak is a very fast growing plant. Of course, it gets acorns, as all oaks do. This one, it's green when it's younger. The acorns turn brown with age, and of course, they feed all kinds of animals: the turkeys, deer, squirrels. The raccoons like to eat the acorns. Blue jays apparently really like red oak acorns, and black bears. Though that is not a selling point, I would think that you probably wouldn't plant a red oak to attract a bear to your yard, but that's not hopefully something we need to worry about too much here in Wisconsin. Um, the soil types that these are native to are more of a sandy soil, so they do prefer a sandier site if you have it. Um, I have one growing on my property that was part of the county land at one time, so we have very heavy clay soils pretty much all over our property. So they will grow in clay soils. I just imagine that they probably don't grow quite as fast. Um, Mature size on this one is 60 to 75 feet tall, same width. The branching on this, it's a very clean looking tree, so does not have as many branches coming off of that main trunk as the oak trees in the white oak family do. Swamp white oak is another native in Wisconsin. Of course, it's in the white oak family. The bark on this one, as you can see again in the left-hand photo, is very similar to a bur oak, where it's very corky and bumpy. Even on younger species, you'll notice that. The leaves are not quite as deeply lobed as a straight white oak would be. Again, it gets the acorns. It has more of a kind of a fuzzy cap on the acorns. This one will, it grows best in full sun, as all oaks do, tolerant of part shade, but 6 hours or more is the preferred light requirement for them. They have a moderate growth rate, so it's not going to be as slow growing as the bur oak, but it's not going to be nearly as fast as the red oak that I was just talking about. Hardiness zone on this one also zone 4, so it's definitely hardy here in Wisconsin, just not as hardy as the bur oak and the red oak. The acorns, of course, feed same animals: squirrels, deer, turkeys especially prefer the swamp white oak acorns. And the mature size on the swamp white is a little bit smaller than some of the other oaks. It's a 50 to 60 foot tall and same width instead of 70, 80 feet tall. But again, you're going to need to give this one space. I wouldn't plant it 5 feet away from your house because you'll have branches growing into your house pretty soon. And white oak is the last of the native oaks that we will be selling in the garden center this year. The acorns on it are a little bit more elongated than the other oak acorns. The leaves you can see are symmetrically lobed. They don't have more or less like the bur oak does. It's just a real nice symmetrical leaf. The white oak will be a slow grower, just like the bur oak are. And again, the acorns, they'll feed a lot of the wildlife, deer and the squirrels. Turkeys will eat them as well. I didn't have any notes about whether or not the wood ducks like this one or not, so I'm not really sure if that would attract any of the wood ducks to your property. Um, the white oak too has really nice red fall color, so if you're looking for another oak, you don't really want the red oak. The white oak will also have a nice red fall coloring for you. The mature size on this one really varies based on your site. So if you have a clay soil, um, that one tends to be closer to 50 to 60 feet tall in the same width. If you have sandier soil, which is what the white oak prefers, it'll be closer to 70 or 80 feet tall and wide. So just be aware of that when you're planting, what kind of soil type you have. And again, this one is also hardy to zone 4 here in Wisconsin. So that does it for the native trees we'll have. We have 4 native evergreens that we'll be selling this year. The first is the balsam fir. I'll have this hopefully in two different sizes if my supplier sends what I have ordered. The balsam fir prefers full sun to part sun, so at least 4 hours of sun a day. And this nice pyramid shape, like a Christmas tree shape, is actually how it grows. It doesn't need a lot of pruning to achieve this shape. However, it is a very slow growing tree. I got one in from the Arbor Day Foundation eight, I want to say 8, maybe 7 years ago, and planted it as an 18-inch tall sapling, little seedling from them. And right now it is 3 feet tall. So really not a fast growing plant. It's not going to fill in nearly as quickly for you as, say, a spruce would. Pines grow faster than the balsam fir do. But the fir do have this nice shape. They're generally speaking, they're rabbit and deer resistant. I live in the woods and I have plenty of deer. I had 16 in my yard the other day. We used to have a lot of rabbits until we got hawks and owls, so they've been taking care of our rabbits. But the back when we had a lot of rabbits, they also stayed away from the fir that I have planted. This one, it ranges in height, 40 to 75 feet tall. Really, probably depends on the site. 20 to 25 feet wide is usually what you'll see from this one. The needles on it are very fragrant too. It smells, because this one's used quite a bit as a Christmas tree, it always smells like Christmas to me. This particular fir is tolerant of some salt, like road salt, driveway salt, so you could plant this one a little bit closer to a roadside, or along your driveway if that's something that you wanted to do, and it wouldn't get as brown as like a spruce or a pine would if you were to plant those along a salty area. The fir, however, do need very well drained soils. They do not tolerate having wet root system ever. So just make sure that you're aware of that. They need a very well drained, sort of even dry site in order to do well. And this is hardy to zone 3. All right, Eastern red cedar. A lot of people possibly know of this plant, they just don't realize it. It is a juniper. It's the native juniper in Wisconsin. The the eastern red cedar itself prefers full sun. It's like the Quaking Aspen, where it's one of the first that you'll see colonize an area. It goes from prairie to woods, and the Quaking Aspen and the eastern red cedar will be the first couple of them that you'll see forming a forest. The native species will be 30 to 40 feet tall, about 15 to 20 feet wide at maturity. And you'll see here the berries. Cedar waxwings especially love these berries. There are other birds that will eat them too, but the cedar waxwings especially prefer these. So that's nice to have around because there are some that stick around in Wisconsin throughout the winter. So it's great to have options for them to eat when it's 4 degrees in January. This plant is hardy to zone 2, so again, it's very hardy in Wisconsin. Not really going to be a problem in terms of polar vortex winters that we have here. The American larch is one of my favorite coniferous species, also known as tamarack. It's the same thing. The larch is a little bit different than other conifers that you'll see. It's actually a deciduous conifer. And now I've had some people ask, how is it a deciduous conifer? If it's a conifer, it's evergreen. Yes, to a point. There are a couple of different conifer trees that are actually deciduous, and they do lose their needles in the winter. So the larch is one of them. You can see in the left-hand photo, they have the kind of mint green needles that come out in spring. They'll be green throughout the summer, and then in fall, if you look at the right-hand photo, they turn this kind of bronzy yellow, almost orange, but not quite, very yellow, golden yellow in the fall. They typically change colors later than a lot of other trees do as well. So after the maples have already dropped all of their leaves, then you'll start to see the larch change to this golden yellow color, and then they do drop their needles typically in November sometime. So they'll be bare. I've had people tell me that they lost their larch and they need a new one because it died. It lost all of its needles. and usually I end up telling him just wait. It'll it'll end up growing new needles in May, generally by Memorial Day, June 1st or so. So that is definitely not something you need to worry about. Full sun is what is preferred by this plant. Part sun is tolerated, but you'll see them quite a bit on the edges of forests and especially in wetlands. This one loves to be planted in boggy wetland type areas. It'll handle standing water really well, and actually it's kind of drought tolerant as well. So once it gets established, it's pretty adaptable wherever you want to plant it. But if you're looking for something along like a back side of your property and it's a lower spot, the tamarack might be a great option for you. And one other little note, the cones that you can see in the left-hand photo, they actually come out a very dark maroon color before they change to brown with age. So that's just another fun little tidbit about the larch. And white pine is the last of the Wisconsin native evergreens that we will be selling this year. You can see in the left-hand photo, it doesn't have a really great pyramid shape to it. It is more of an open, almost columnar type of growing habit. So this doesn't make a great hedge if you want to block a lot of, sight lines. You might be better off planting the white pine and then something else in front of it. That's a little bit lower, just to, keep those open areas blocked a little bit better. The white pine has really soft needles. They're longer than that of a spruce or even a fir. So they're very soft, they're longer, and you can see the pine cones. They're a long and skinny pine cone that basically hangs from the branches. White pine prefers either full sun or part shade. Either one is fine, so 4 hours or more each day. It's a very large tree, so it'll be minimum 50 feet. Sometimes it gets up to 70 or 80 feet tall. 20 to 30 feet wide, so it's definitely not going to be as wide as it is tall. And like you can see from the photo here, it's more of a columnar growing habit, so it's going to be the same width pretty much all the way up. It's a moderate grower. It grows slower in clay soils, grows faster in sandy soils. So if you have a heavier soil, don't expect it to grow super fast for you, but it'll still get there. Moderate growth habit. And then the hardiness zone on this one is hardy to zone 3. So definitely something that you could plant and have it grow well here in Wisconsin. And that's all I have for you today. So if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. Email address is there, knagreenhouse@gmail.com. We have 2 locations, so I'm typically at the Verona location. Sometimes I can get over to the Fitchburg spot, but we have another person named Cindy over at the Fitchburg location who's very smart and can answer your questions as well. If you do have specific questions for me, you can email at the Gmail address there and just put "Attention Jessica" in the subject line, and I will be sure to answer your questions. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.